Ola is saying that they're going to lay off nearly 1,400 employees, nearly 25% of its total workforce.
Ola's Chief Operating Officer, Arun Srinivas, has resigned.
The company saw revenues come down by nearly 100% over the last 2 months.
Coronavirus-related lockdown is leading to bigger problem and troubles in the startup sector.
Srinivas's exit follows that of Ola Financial Services CEO Nitin Gupta.
They'll have to do these layoffs as they do not see the situation improving anytime soon.
Look at Ola's cab business. Drivers don't make enough money in spite of working for long hours and increase in your income even if you subtract 15,000 rupees as your EMI. So if you were one of these drivers and your income increased by 50%, what would you do? You would buy better groceries for your house, you would send your children to a better school, or you would start an SIP. So overall, you will upgrade your lifestyle, right? Well, this is exactly what the Ola drivers started to do. But as soon as the control phase of Ola and Uber came in, gradually their incentives started to decrease. Petrol prices started India's first subscription marketplace, wherein you can purchase
Our Mytaxicab startup is a new business model like Shopify for taxis or ONDC for taxis ONDT. Our startup is alternative for existing players like OLA and UBER aggregator model. With a market size of 12.5 million, the Indian taxi industry has huge growth potential. Now, it's time to drive this industry into the future. Presenting Mytaxicab, the first ever driver-friendly platform which uses blockchain, Web3 technology and provides government-approved fares all the time. Mytaxicab lets drivers enhance their earnings, provides reliable cab service to their customers and helps in efficient trips pan-India. With Mytaxicab, a driver can do spot booking on a passenger request. Drivers can also customize their trips, charge government-approved rates and don't have to pay any third-party commission. No third-party commission leads to lower fare rates for customers and more earnings for the drivers. Worried about any emergency situation? We have a solution for that too. Mytaxicab has a SAAS button and live tracking and trip sharing facility, through which the driver or the passenger can send an instant alert to the admin or police control team or emergency contacts. With over 16,000 drivers signed up already from 10 states and 40 cities, Mytaxicab is on a mission to empower Indian taxi drivers. Here is your chance to be a part of an industry that is expected to reach a potential growth of 500 billion Indian rupees by 2025. Are you ready to hop in?
Hi everybody! Ola is one of the most revolutionary companies in the Indian business ecosystem. But ever since the pandemic has faded away, Ola's cab business has been getting into some deep trouble. More than 30 to 35,000 cabs have gone out of business, the surcharge is beginning to pain the customers, and even after the pandemic, on top of that, even the employees of Ola are leaving. And with all this trouble, even after 11 years into the business, Ola cabs are still far away from profitability. So the question is, how did this revolutionary company get into such deep troubles in spite of the pandemic fading away? What exactly are the challenges faced by the company? And most importantly, what are the pointers that we need to keep an eye on to understand these companies like Ola, Zomato and Swiggy, they become more and more valuable because of the network effect. And their growth in the market can be stated with a 4-phase framework. The first phase is cash drain. This is when a company spends a ton of money to acquire the stakeholders. In case of Ola, they gave us insane discounts and ultra cheap rides to tempt us to download the app, and the drivers were given very lucrative incentives, because of which both customers and drivers were super happy. So in this phase, we got cheap rides at our doorstep and the drivers made 70 to 80,000 rupees per month driving Ola cabs. And this is where the second phase comes in, which is trust building. Now you see, if you're a blue collar worker making 30,000 rupees per month and you see your cab driver friend making 80,000 rupees per month by working for the exact same hours, what would you do? You would also become a cab driver, right? Well, here's where, because of the trust that Ola had built with the drivers, people in the lower economic strata actually started leaving their job, applied for loans and bought a car just to become an Ola Uber driver. Similarly, from the customer standpoint, we all got habituated with Ola and Uber, and as more and more people, both from the side of customers and drivers, started using Ola, the company started growing massively. But at the same time, with each passing quarter, they were incurring hundreds of crores of losses. Now here's where the third phase came in, which is dependency. Now you see guys, you being a blue collar worker, after leaving your job, once you buy a car on an EMI, you are stuck with the cab business for 5 years until you pay off your loan. Similarly, from the customer's end, we started getting reimbursements. Some of us even left the thought of owning a car. We bought an Ola pass, used Ola share and made Ola an important part of our lifestyle. This is when many conventional cab services went out of the business as the Indian market started pivoting towards Ola and Uber. And this is where the fourth phase came in, which is control. And here's where, after creating a powerful, irreversible ecosystem of both drivers and customers, Ola started to decrease its incentives to the drivers and started imposing surcharge pricing for customers. And this is where the real struggle for Ola started, which was from 2018 and 19. Now you see guys, if you were an Ola driver and your income jumped from 20 to 30k to 50 to 60k per month in just 2 years, that's a 50% increasing, and as the number of drivers increased, the income of the drivers started decreasing from 70,000 rupees to barely 30 to 35,000 rupees. And this is where we saw massive protests pop up from different parts of India, wherein the drivers started protesting against cab companies. And Uber drivers joining in actually got affected. And you know what guys, long story short, while Ola now is in the fourth phase of its operation, which is in the control phase, Dunzo and Instamart are now in the cash drain phase, wherein they are incurring losses just to give incentives to their, even after charging the customers so much and paying the drivers so less, the company is still incurring heavy losses. So practically none of the stakeholders are winning the game. This is the story of Ola's struggle in India. And this brings me to want to understand the future, go back and study the past. History always repeats itself because we don't pay attention the first time. So if you want to understand what is going to happen in India, you must study a similar bubble that happened in the past, and immediately you will have the superpower to predict the future. In this case, although the product was insanely awesome, since it was into a completely new market which had no regulations, when these regulations popped up in the market, Napster fell prey to it and went out of business. But after these regulations were established, Spotify emerged in the same space doing the exact same thing. But today, it is $1 billion company. This is how the four type of companies are the ones that are just too ahead of their time. The best example of the same is this company called Z.com. This was nothing but the YouTube of the 1990s that was made for video streaming. But unfortunately, the broadband speeds were too slow. You had to install codecs in your browser which was too complex, and eventually Z.com did not pick up at all. But you know what guys? After Z.com shut down in 2003, just 2 years later, YouTube came up, and this is when broadband penetration had reached a healthy 60% and Adobe Flash had solved the codec problem. And again, in spite of operating in the same space doing the exact same thing, while Z.com failed, YouTube today is riding on $28 billion in profits. Now, number one is barrier to entry. In simple words, what is it that your company is doing that is making it more and more difficult for the competitors to catch up? A classic example of the same is the comparison of edtech companies and YouTube creators. And if you remember from our edtech episode, these creators like Aman Dattarwal and Physicswala and all these creators are actually creating a barrier to entry by creating a humongous subscriber base and by adding a ton of value to the subscribers, by which there is cultivation of trust. So tomorrow, there cannot be $1 million startup that just says that here's $1 million, please give me the trust of 1 million subscribers. So this trust factor and this humongous subscriber base that these YouTube creators are building, that itself is an asset that is a barrier to entry, which is very difficult for a rival to actually imitate. Similar for is the overlapping with the national agenda. Classic cases being hydrogen fuel, electric vehicles and solar related companies. You see guys, no matter how futuristic green hydrogen fuel related companies look like today, if the government wants these companies to be the future, they will survive. Similarly, if the government wants EVs to survive, even if it's not market viable yet, the subsidies will make them viable. And lastly, the most important factor that I look for is customer lifetime value versus customer acquisition cost. So in simple words, if you're spending 10 lakh rupees into marketing and you get 100 customers, your CAC or customer acquisition cost is 10 lakh rupees divided by 100, which is 10,000 rupees per customer. So you typically spend 10,000 rupees to get a single customer. And the customer lifetime value is the total revenue that a customer will generate during your engagement. So after downloading Skillshare, if the analytics say that people keep the subscription active for 1 year, then the average customer lifetime value is 180 rupees into 12 months of subscription, which is 2160 rupees. So if a company like Skillshare has a customer acquisition cost of less than 500 rupees and a customer lifetime value of 2160 rupees, it's an amazing number because they're spending 500 rupees and they're getting 2160 rupees in return for every single customer. But if their customer acquisition cost is 10,000 rupees for a lifetime value of 2160 rupees, that would be very, very dangerous. Why? Because they are losing 7,840 rupees with each passing customer. Whereas if it's a brand like Byju's, even if they spend 20,000 rupees to acquire a single customer, it's absolutely worth it, provided they're selling a course worth 20,000 rupees or more. Because if they retain the user for the next year's course of 20,000 rupees, Byju's would be extremely profitable because the next year they don't have to bear the customer acquisition cost. And at the same time, like we saw in our EdTech episode, if this cost of customer acquisition shoots up to 50,000-60,000 rupees, then that would be a disaster. So this ratio of average customer lifetime value versus customer acquisition cost is very, very important. The more this ratio is, the more is the scope for profit. The lesser this ratio is, the more risky the business gets.
Hope this episode is helpful to understand market research and decide the best startup. Invest today in a startup as the best choice. Ask us why by connecting more details. Thanks for watching.